Here we go. 3, 2, 1, and welcome to the recap second helpings show that we don't call it that anymore for too complicated.
We never
It's a reaction video. I don't know what we call it because I make this joke every time. So too complicated for history. Aaron Bush was on. It was a unique episode.
Dr. Aaron Bush.
Dr. Aaron Bush. She was part of a very unique episode. We were just talking about that before we hit record. For a number of reasons. I have one. You don't mind if I start?
Yeah.
Time period. I thought it was the first time, I want to say, or one of the first times that we focused on a more modern time frame. Somewhere, maybe possibly some of our listeners were alive. Possibly. I don't know how old our listeners are.
They're super old.
They're pretty old.
All right, well, let me.
Don't know how to. I don't know how to use podcasts.
Let me talk up.
We talked about. Never mind.
Yeah. See,
I know I'm trying to go back in my mind, but yes, it's the first time we've talked about the progressive era.
Lynn, when is the progressive era?
I think it ends. It's the turn of the century. So it's like 1880s, 1890 to early 1900s. I think you can push it. But you're still talking about people who are over 100 years old if they were alive.
Yeah, about 130.
And you're pushing it.
Jordan, what was grade school like back then?
Ha ha! It's funny. I know.
Did you take your pet dinosaur on show and tell?
Let's talk about that later. She did reference certain things like Prohibition and other eras that followed that do sort of, this is what I was referencing when I was talking about how some people may be alive or know someone who was alive. Okay, can we move on? Thanks.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the recap show. Jordan Sloan is wrong.
I was right from a certain perspective.
Yeah.
Star Wars quote.
Okay.
I will say though that a lot of the points still seem to be relevant. Now, what I mean is that we still fight over social norms. I'm going to call it that today. And what's so interesting is I believe that there are things we talk about today that 100 years from now will be like, how is that even a part of a conversation? It's so obvious that X or Y is the answer. How is that even up for debate? So when I hear this with the benefit of hindsight, I have that same thought, like, what? Hanging out, drinking, milkshakes? Or what was it? Like women just existing, basically?
Yeah.
Like, not to justify it in any way, but like, was that a conversation they were having back then, or was it a small minority with a loud voice?
Well, I think she gets into it a little bit, right? How she talks about how progressive policymakers, we all want, the earth to live forever, but how we do it is very different.
Right. It's defining the public good. They all want what's best for the public good, but what is the public good? And it was the people, as is not unlike other eras, the elites who had the power to define good and then to impose that good onto others and then punish them if they don't live up to that standard set by the elites.
This was a tough episode to get through. Not like Erin's fantastic.
She is.
Dr. Bush is great.
Yeah.
I was so engaged. It's just listening to the things that were happening and the way people were controlled. I mean, just the idea like of the creation of reformatories was wild, and then like what they become as far as like they're state controlled, but they're doing really heavy things, but they're trying to make people reformed, right? Like to be fixed for to go back into society. There's a lot going on.
Right. And you could be sent there for, not listening to your parents, or if they think your parents aren't doing a good job, they being the elite progressives, if you have a boyfriend your parents don't like, if, you know, you hang out with the wrong people, you can be sent to reformatory to, you know, improve yourself.
Now, was there a hard and fast rule? Was there a line, a defined law that one could reference? Or was it so vague that you could make the justification? I mean,
oh, yeah.
crazy.
Erin said that she saw the term incorrigible a lot, which could pretty much encompass anything. So it's all interpretation. I mean, you know, there's a lot of things like that today as far as interpreting laws. And the thing that I thought was really interesting is she talks about the status versus the criminal offenses. Because the criminal, okay, you do something against the law, but a status offense, it depends on who you are. So it's like children. Obviously, if, you know, I'm hanging out with people that my parents don't like, oh, well, I'm not a child. But if I'm 15, then that's a bad thing. And, you know, I can be sent to a reformatory. So it's, you know, she kept talking about the status offenses, which were very interesting, and how the punishment depended also on who you were, class, race, gender. You would all have different punishments as well.
Sadly, that part didn't feel weird. That part
a lot
made
of this,
sense.
yeah, a lot of this did not feel that alien.
Yeah. I mean, it's you know, history repeats itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we acknowledge the bad, then hopefully we can change it. It's actually pretty funny. There's a book I read called Unwind or Unwound.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really interesting book that the context is very different, but it's one of those things where, like, if you basically something can happen to you before you turn 16 and your parents have the choice to have you unwound or essentially sent to like a reformatory.
Oh,
it's worse, but
right.
It's a really cool book. Definitely check it out. But it just reminded me a lot of that, where it was like, I don't like that Timmy's not doing his homework, so bye.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's late outside, you know, or it's late out, and I see these kids roaming around. All right,
must be
reformatory.
Yeah, you know, there's a really modern argument in that, which is allowing parents to make decisions for their kids and who's responsible for making decisions. Like, it's very interesting. I was just watching a show on the regulation for homeschooling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting. Like, you're basically saying that the parents are responsible, and do we by and large trust the parents? And I don't know. I'll go on the record as saying I don't think so. I don't think so. You know, not that I think that necessarily government or whatever, but some is the right solution, but some sort of standardization. And it's interesting that basically back then it was also like, we're leaving it up to the individual to make the decision. And how much do you love your children, or from what perspective do you view your children as being good or bad?
But then the nuance that they have, that the state has the responsibility to take care of the children if they're not being taken care of by the parents,
and it's the elites who decide whether or not they're being taken care of.
Right.
I mean, would they, you know, you have a kid who decides to have a fit in the grocery store. I mean, is an elite going to come up, drag them away and say they need to be fixed? You know, it's like kids are kids. So it's always how we're defining that behaving well. You know, because no kid's perfect.
Yeah, and you know,
I mean, Jordan was when he was little, but you know, we can only aspire to
a perfect pain.
Hey-o. You know, I was part of a generation as recently as that. No old person jokes, please. But where kids who were young, 5 years old, 6 years old, running around when they should be doing homework and they wanted to play, and parents were like, "This kid has ADD. Let's put them on medication."
Right.
So it's like, you know, I don't think that there's any, this is different than what we're talking about in the podcast episode, but there are times where the decision isn't necessarily malicious. It's just more perspective, which is why it can get so gray. I think about, I'm going to use a really goofy modern example. Thanos from Marvel. He wanted to save reality, and his solution was, because resources were so scarce, to get rid of half the people in order to save the other half. And of course, The conflict being you can't just kill people. But from a certain perspective, not that I'm justifying it, both were doing what they thought was right. And that seems to be a classic trope with the villain in some movies, is that they, in their own mind, are doing something that's right.
Well, no one thinks they're the bad guy. No one sets out to be the bad guy, or the bad girl, just the bad person, right? Like no one thinks that. And I mean, that's not entirely true. Yeah. Like there are
some
chaotic people who just want to see the world burn.
It's going to quote the Joker. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, exactly. A rupee the size of a tangerine. Anyway, sorry. That's from a movie, kids. No one sets out to be that, right? And so the thing that we have to be careful of is justifying the means for an end.
Right.
And we need to figure, I think really what it comes down to is figuring out the means and the process. That's more important than the end. Because I think that we're just, when you try and shoehorn everyone into these reforms, I mean, like, what would it take to get a true utopia, right? Like, I love sci-fi, and so I read a lot of science fiction books, and I watch a lot of science fiction movies, and they're all technically dystopian. But that's because of what it took to get to a society that is very well balanced. But it doesn't, necessarily mean you have individual freedom, and so then is the good of the many outweigh the good of the one, right, or the few? Classic philosophical debate. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're just watching these experiments to a certain degree.
Yeah. And it's not unlike today. I mean, you were saying, Jordan, they would give kids the ADHD medicine or the ADD or whatever medicine. Back then they sent them to reformatories and they gave them medicine, and now they might send them to therapy. I don't know, but it's always we're trying to improve, make the world a better place.
Right.
And unfortunately, we all have different ideas about what that is and how to do it. So you've kind of got everyone with the best intentions, but
yeah, it's just interesting because, wow, my thought totally escaped me. But we're gonna recover this live. It's really the idea that God, I'm really hoping that if I start the sentence, I'll remember it.
That's the worst.
I totally agree, Jordan. What you said makes a lot of sense.
I'm so glad that everyone agrees.
I'm just gonna pop in real quick, and if you have inspiration, step in front of me.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really do wish, Lynn, you asked a question near the end of the episode about, do you have any stories of the individuals?
Right.
And Dr. Bush used the term silence in the archives. And it's because so many, I think it was like 23,000 women in particular in just the area she was studying, came in and out. And there weren't really any other details other than, hey, they were on record and they were seen. And I found that like both gut-wrenching and heartbreaking, but also like so fascinating. It's like, we don't know who these people are,
right?
Because there aren't any record, like their personal records weren't brought to these reformatories, and if they were, I'm sure they were thrown away or whatever,
right? We don't have diaries or anything. That would be magnificent.
I know. So it's sad that we can't learn more about those individuals and what they went through and what their experiences were like. I mean, maybe Jordan can, because some of them are probably still alive.
Funny.
But
Jordan's going to get his phone
Here's
out.
what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm going to change it because I do remember what I was going to say, and I do think it's important, which is that you guys were talking about the ends and the means, and the ends don't necessarily justify the means, and maybe the means don't justify the ends. But honestly, I think if we want to make that utopian society, because you bring up a good point about how dystopian societies seem to be the norm in these sci-fi pieces, because we all look at our present and go, well, that's clearly where we're headed. But anything good, I think, takes work. So both the means and the ends have to be justified. You can't just write one or the other off. And guess what? That sucks. It's a lot of hard work. It means you have to be careful about everything that you do and every choice that you make. But that, in my opinion, is how you get to a utopian society is through the effort of the people. Now, we're talking about modern day and how we're not there, but I spent some time in Japan. Man, do I feel like they're closer than us. Why? Because it's a society of people that are all working together. And why are they working together? Because they come from a 1,000-year history of understanding that there's like this generational representation of who you are and how important it is to have self-accountability. Now, if no one was watching and no one would ever find out, would you do what was right? And that's a question that I feel like person A in Western culture and person B in Eastern culture might answer completely differently and have a justification equal for both. Anyway, that was my...
Yeah, but who's deciding what's right?
Well, I suppose at this point in time, it's the law. But yeah, you could say that the law was one thing 100 years ago. There are other things.
Okay, so next question. Do you believe in our political system?
Oh, do we have time?
Is acting in the best interest of all? Yeah, exactly. So I hear what you're saying. I just there's a lot more context and a lot more complicated nuances, I think, to really go through that. I think as far as like a culturally like so I'm very excited. I'm actually going to Tokyo in a few weeks with my wife, and I'm part Japanese, so it's really exciting to get to go visit the homeland, if I may. And I do have some friends that are literally there right now, and they're talking about how clean it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing. But there's also a level of, I also know that like people work themselves literally to death in Japan, right? So like it's not. There's no perfect society right now. So like, sure, there's a lot of things that are nice. Like, yeah, walking through cities and feeling safe and being really clean, utopian. People working themselves to death, dystopian. So there's just a lot of give and pull. And I just want to make sure that like,
you point that out.
I mean, I love the idea. We should do a bonus episode where we debate and have an idea, maybe for bonus content if we start a Patreon, which might be coming soon.
Well, I think that Aaron told a really, really good story, because I think it's when we were talking about why did this start? Why all of a sudden were we so worried? And it was because we had all these different cultures and religions immigrating into the US, and they all have different perspectives and different views. And she tells the story about how Jane Addams, who is the famous progressive woman, how she went over to someone's house. I think she said they were Italian, and the woman, and Jane Addams, prohibition, does not drink, and the woman offers her a glass of wine, and Jane Addams says, well, no thank you. And then the woman thinks, oh, I've offended her, and so she offers her best whiskey. So she's actually double sort of offended Jane Addams, but she thinks that she's being kinder because she's offended her. You know what I mean? So it's all that the woman was trying to do. She thought she was being respectful and a good host, but based on the norms that Addams lived by, she was the exact opposite. And so I think part of it was just to take all of these different cultures and religions and backgrounds and force them into this, progressive view of normal and good.
It's that.
And that's kind of what you're saying, Jordan, is that because our country is so diverse, culturally, religious, it's more, difficult, I think, to have one vision of utopia.
It's a matter of perspective. To
Right.
round it out one more time with a classic sci-fi trope, it's some sort of AI or a robot that you want to help save humanity or the planet, and their determination in order to do that is to kill all humans because we are the thing that's causing the earth to die, and both are trying to save the planet, and the perspectives are totally opposite. So yeah. I honestly think we could go on and on about this, and I think a clearer image comes into view 100 years from now, and like we're perpetually only needing to look back to determine what ended up being the choice. It's a shame that that's the stage of evolution we find ourselves in, but I don't know that the solution is obvious at the moment.
Oh, I don't think it's obvious. No, I think people have tried.
But we do want to hear from the audience. If you guys have some additional thoughts on, everything we've talked about, I'm certainly open to feedback. Please leave messages in the comments and reach out to us. But while you're doing that, listen to the episode, Too Complicated for History with Erin Bush.
Of course.
And please check out her website, erinbush.org. She does have a book coming out at some point in the future.
Right. Just got a book contract. So.
Virginia Press, you said.
We'll be doing a second episode with Dr. Bush when the book officially comes out. And of course we will share that book with all of y'all.
But she has a great website, and there's some links to some of her work. And so definitely check that out. It's very interesting.
erinbush.org.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then for all things us, 2c4hpod.com. If you want premium listening, check out intohistory.com/2c4h. You can check us out on a bunch of other channels, hop in with Discord and chat with Lynn and Isaac about different things. Mostly Lynn, because she's awesome.
Yeah.
really, really engaged there. And then might have some new stuff coming out. We have a daily birthday podcast with featuring Jordan Sloan. He's a rascal. Look at that face. You see it every day. I don't know
which side he's going to be on. So I'll just...
Yeah. Exactly. Which way?
Right over there.
And I'm trying to think. Oh, we have a new podcast launching on October 31st. So it'll be a spooky one.
And a new 2C4H episode.
Yes. And we have a really fun, really icky, yucky, creepy horror podcast coming your way on the 31st. It's awesome. It's a crazy story.
Yeah.
Other than that, we're nearing the end of season 1, by the way, just to have a nostalgic moment here. Yeah, we have 5 episodes left.
These are the days we
started recording them like a year and a half ago. Yeah. Jordan, his nostalgia during the time that he's...
Yes, I do. I have two things. I always feel nostalgia in the moment because I understand that these are the moments. And I also assign value to absolutely everything. And so I have become a hoarder. I'm like, I can't throw this sandwich out.
These are the things I would love
this moldy sandwich.
Yeah.
I love it. This is just a digital
there are worse things
fake background. I'm literally just in front of a pile of stuff behind the green screen.
And those are all real plants.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I literally kill fake plants. That's how little of a green thumb I have. Okay. Ranting, raving. Goodbye.
2c4hpod.com.
Yes. And see you next week.
See you next week.
erinbush.org. Chilies.